Welcome to the Advance Your Art podcast, where we talk about the journey from artist to entrepreneur and everything in between. You've worked hard to hone your craft. Now take it to the next level with tips, techniques, strategies, and routines used by successful artists to grow their businesses and careers. Now, let's get started and have some fun with your host, Yuri Cataldo.
Well, hello, Kim. Welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Good, thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking your time to chat with me today. I really appreciate it. I'd like to start off by asking how you describe yourself and what it is that you do.
There's a lot of breadth in that. I'm an author, but I'm also a mentor, a writing and publishing coach, a photographer, a travel writer, and a few other things on the side. Mm-hmm. My major focus in recent years is split between my own writing and helping other people get their ideas and their writing out to the world as books.
Okay. Wow, you must be an incredibly busy person. How do you manage your schedule to get all of that done?
It's a bit chaotic at times.
Sure. I bet.
I tend to live by having an electronic diary, but that's more so that I don't miss any important appointments, things that have a locked time. Mm-hmm. As far as getting other things done, I'm not a morning person. I do not do mornings well.
Okay.
So the joy of working for myself, running my own business, is that I can do things at whatever time of day works for me. Mm-hmm. And what I do on any one day tends to be driven by the schedule on all sorts of things, because when working with books, there's always, from the moment that something is completed and heading towards publishing and launch, mm-hmm. there's kind of a schedule of times that you need to do things so that it gets the best launch possible. Promotions happen, things stay visible to people. Mm-hmm. But in the process of getting to there, particularly if I'm working with an author and helping them get their book done, there's a whole series of processes where we go backwards and forwards between us. So I can't go, this week I'm working on this book, because what I'm going to need to do on that book may take a few hours or a few days, and then I send the latest version of the proof or a series of questions or something to the author, and I have to wait for them to respond, send me back other images, send me back more info, whatever. Mm-hmm. So I always have a stack of things that are kind of interleaved that I'm doing depending on where each of them is up to.
Okay.
Which sometimes is a bit frustrating. Other times is really good, because there are times when that makes it easier to slot in time to write my own books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I bet. You didn't go to school for writing. Were there early experiences in your life that then planted a seed for your later writing career?
I used to write, as a child, I would write things, just random ideas would come and I would write short stories and stuff. Mm-hmm. And my writing for things you have to write at school was reasonable. I read a lot. I always read from when I was tiny. I could read before I ever went to school. My parents taught me at home, and I just absorbed books. I was out of the kids section of the local library and into the adult section at the age of 8. Because I was in the kids, I'd read all the stuff I wanted to read there.
Oh, sure.
So it was just seemed sensible that I wrote things. When I was 15, I had my first piece of stuff published, which was an article about a horse event in a national magazine. But then somewhere in that 15 to 20 kind of age group, going through the whole late teenage angst and all sorts of crises like I think we all do at some level, and doing a year of uni and deciding I didn't want to do that anymore, and somewhere in that I kind of got convinced that I couldn't write, that I really didn't do it particularly well. So I would still randomly write poetry, but I stopped doing much else. And so I worked in a whole range of different jobs for many years, and it slowly dawned on me while I was doing this that I was, in fact, writing all the time. Writing the kind of stuff that you do in jobs like project reports and emails explaining things and documents about stuff and FAQs, and the list goes on. The kind of thing that these days I describe as bureaucratic fiction. Which requires as much creative mind effort as writing actual fiction. And it sort of sunk in on me that, hey, if I can write this stuff, and I was perpetually teaching the guys who work for me or people who work with me how to write things better for the stuff they were doing. In some cases, teaching suppliers how to write their proposals so that the people we had to get to sign off on them in the organisation would sign off on them. And I went, maybe I should go back to actually writing stuff of my own. And at the same time, we've always had a small business on the side, even while doing corporate jobs and things, with friends. And one of the things we'd done in that way back in 1990 was publish a hardcover book. Not our own content, but previously unreleased content for a reasonably well-known author. And it was a great learning experience, but it was also torture, because in the pre-digital publishing era, publishing something was a very big undertaking. And we kind of put that aside after that, and we published art prints for quite some years. And then around 2000, the whole China cheap prints availability to the world kind of exploded, and it became non-viable. And I just parked everything, both my own writing and what we were doing with business. And then about 10 years ago, the whole digital publishing thing started to really surface. And I looked at it and went, that would make it easier. Maybe I should go back to writing. And so I started writing and just pushed out some things of my own. At that stage, primarily non-fiction sort of things. And I started engaging with a lot of other people in the publishing community. So I thought that people would be wanting to know how to actually publish their book. But the questions I kept getting was, how do I get it written? How do I get from this idea in my head to something that can be published? And I started working with people on that, on how to write, because all that stuff I'd done in corporate around teaching people how to write reports and proposals and the rest of it, the tools and the techniques you use to work out how to write things are very similar across a multitude of areas. So I started applying all of that to helping people, and then writing books about how to write, and it kind of went from there. And at the same time, I've also been writing fiction and things under pen names and doing more there. And it just kind of exploded, and I intentionally planned things to the point where 3 years ago now I got to walk out of doing corporate jobs at all and just do books and things as a business, which is much more fun and much better for my health.
Oh, yeah, I bet. But so I'm curious on your corporate jobs, because your corporate job was working for the Department of Defense, which...
Well, it was one of them, one amongst many.
Right. Which it sounds absolutely amazing. So before you got into writing in that, like, what did you go to school for, and why did you end up working for the Department of Defense?
So my very first bits of education were more focused around agriculture.
Okay.
And then when I gave up on uni the first time around, because I just didn't like the whole thing, and started working, I worked in all sorts of jobs. In clerical, in sales, I ran a photographic shop, I did all sorts of stuff. I worked as a professional photographer.
Mm-hmm.
I went back and did some uni stuff by correspondence. And the first thing I did is I have a diploma in applied science in horse husbandry. It's like something like but then I went back and I have a graduate diploma in applied science in computing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because all the people around me were into tech and doing things. And that was in like the late 80s, so late 80s, early 90s. So
sure.
Yeah, computers were still an interesting exercise. And oddly enough, I had friends who were into programming in the early 80s, in the very early days of it, and I just looked at it and went, you're all mad. But the further we went, the more interested I got in what people were doing with things and how computers were coming into the workplace. So I ended up actually doing a degree in it. And even though programming used to make no sense to me, I learnt enough of it to decide I didn't want to be doing that. But I ended up doing a lot of infrastructure things. So in the end, I spent sort of 25, 30 years working in IT.
Okay.
And I did everything from hands-on technical to project management and managing technical teams and coordinating national teams. And again, people go, but computers, it's all that analytical, numbersy stuff. You know, how can you be creative and do that? And
mm-hmm.
Well, I don't actually see a boundary. People are very keen to make boundaries between what's creative and what's not. But work with a few people who are really good at coding is the most creative thing in the world.
Oh, yeah.
Because they can visualize something that will happen on a screen pictorially. They can visualize the layer behind it about the connections between all those things that someone interacts with.
Mm-hmm.
And they can visualize the layer behind that, which is millions of lines of semi-gibberish that makes it happen.
Right.
It's the most creative piece of thinking. And look at the apps and things that get developed. You know, where do those ideas come from? Mm-hmm. So there's not really a boundary. It's just another piece of expression.
Mm-hmm.
But I found that the worst thing about working in corporate sort of jobs, and okay, I worked in government, in defence, always a civvy, never in uniform. And for big companies that were outsourcing companies for government. And the thing that was there, the thing that drove me crazy and drives a lot of other people crazy, is that progress in those environments is so slow. There used to be a kind of saying that if you want things to change, wait for someone in a higher level job to die. Because the culture is so embedded. So because change is difficult, you can have a great idea and people can say it's a great idea, but unless you can really get it into the head of one of the traditional people in a higher position, because normally people in higher positions are older, they've been there, they've worked their way up, so their thinking is a few generations behind often.
Right.
Unless you can get them on board, it never happens. So you see these cycles go round where every 5 years or so the same brilliant idea will surface and it'll be a new brilliant idea. And you kind of go, hang on a second, pull out the document from the bottom drawer, change a few names, here's what I prepared earlier. And after about the fourth iteration, this kind of thing, you go, I'm trapped in a Groundhog Day situation. You know? I can't do this anymore. There is no way forward. It's not that I dislike what I did. It's not that I dislike the people I work with, although there were some.